Okay, well, I think I'll get started and introduce Delia Webb. We're very pleased to have her at Cornwall College's first Love Our Planet week. So Delia is a coordinator of the Cornish Plastic Pollution Coalition, or CPPC, which comprises of over 50 environmental organisations, local marine conservation groups, beach cleaning groups, and marine science experts, collectively representing tens of thousands of people in Cornwall and beyond. And we have got the details of Delia's website, or the PPC website. So without more ado, I'll hand over to Delia.
Thank you. That's brilliant. My name's Delia Webb and I'm a biological scientist by degree, and I'm also a marine medic with British Divers Marine Life Rescue Team. So I rescue hurt and injured animals and creatures around our coastline. Everything I'm going to show you today, all the pictures and all the beach cleaned artifacts that I've brought, are from Cornwall, so they're local. So anything that I show you photograph wise or artifact wise has come from our beaches here where we live. I know the Blue Planet is very very popular, and lots of that filming was done in faraway places, but everything I'm showing you today is here and it's happening where we live. So I'm just going to hopefully share a few visuals with you to begin with. So that's me. And this gives you an idea of some of the members of the Cornish Plastic Pollution Coalition. So we have the big groups like Surfers Against Sewage and Cornwall Wildlife Trust and the National Trust. But we also have lots of small environmental groups like Polzeth Marine Conservation Group or Rain Peninsula Beach Care. And dotted around Cornwall, there's a plethora of small environmental groups that have been doing this kind of work for a very long time, even before it became trendy. A lot of these groups have been in existence for 10 or 15 years or more, very quietly going around doing education work, doing beach cleaning and litter picking, doing citizen science. And I think it's off a lot of people's radar. So if you haven't found your local group already, please contact us and find out where your nearest group is so you can actually join in some of their activities. We do an incredible amount of work in all sorts of spheres, and the actual beach cleaning and litter picking, I've got some statistics here just to give you a flavour of how many volunteer hours are contributed just in beach cleaning and litter picking in Cornwall. And in 2018, we had 48,000 hours contributed. And if you cost that against the minimum wage, that's worth about £376,000 to Cornwall. And in 2019, it almost doubled. The volunteers in Cornwall spent about 103,000 hours beach cleaning and litter picking, and the financial contribution is worth about £850,000 to Cornwall, which is an incredible asset. And as I say, I think it's off a lot of people's radars. We have beach cleaners of all shapes, sizes, ages, dotted around North Coast, South Coast, countryside groups as well. And they very quietly go about on a daily basis sometimes. Some of our groups have volunteers who regularly go out daily, beach cleaning, monitoring wildlife. We involve children, young people as well. We frequently, COVID aside, we go into schools and colleges. We do education work face to face, or we can do beach cleans, rock pooling, and do that work outdoors in the environment where it matters. So I'm sorry I can't be with you on a beach today, because ideally that's what would happen. But this is the next best thing. Now, why do the volunteers do what we do? Well, this is my local beach. So I live way down west, in the far west of Cornwall. I happen to live very close to a beautiful beach. So if you walk 20 minutes along the coastal path, this is where you get to. There are no shops, no toilets, no facilities, but it's just amazingly beautiful. We have the most magnificent wildlife and environment here in Cornwall. Our water is clean. Our seas are blue. You can see the turquoise seas and the golden sands, and the cliffs. We are very blessed, I think, to live here. But the reason the volunteers do the work they do is that sometimes our beautiful, amazing scenery and countryside and coast looks like this. Now, this is the same beach on a different day, and it's quite frequently covered in plastics. It's remote, it's wild, but the plastics and the pollution can affect even our remote beaches too. And it's heartbreaking, not just bottles. We get, any amount of plastic straws. I mean, you know about bottle tops and straws being items that we find quite regularly. But I want to show you some items that you might not realise we find on a very regular basis on our cleaning trips around Cornwall. One of the most prevalent types of plastic pollution we find in the environment around the coast is fishing related plastics. So nets, rope, twine, fishing line, angling line, lures, even fishermen's gloves that are made of a type of rubbery plastic. Massive crates, containers, lots of different types, so we call it ghost gear. So that was fishing related, and it's either been lost or abandoned or broken, and it's ended up polluting the sea. We even get pieces of plastic that come from very far away, and we look for clues on the plastic. And that's really useful, because if we can tell where the plastics are coming from, if we can identify the source, we're more likely to be able to stop them. And interestingly, this float is a fishing float, and it actually had somebody's name on and an identification number. And Gary Spiney, would you believe, is a lobster fisherman in North America. So Cornwall actually gets plastic pollution, not just from the United Kingdom. We take a hit because we're a peninsula. We're surrounded by water and wind and waves, and we seem to get everybody's plastic from everywhere. About 3 years ago now, the voluntary groups in Cornwall decided we would collect just bottle tops, specifically to count them, to get some idea of the scale of the problem just in bottle tops. So between October and February, we collected the bottle tops, we counted them, made them into a chain that we could measure. And in just those few months, we collected 66,000 bottle tops. And the chain that we took down to the beach to measure, it took 250 volunteers to carry it, because it was 1.1 kilometres long. So that gives you a bit of an idea of the scale of the problem. It's not just one or two plastic items, it's thousands. This is a particularly sad picture. It's a beach near Tregantle, so that's Whitsand Bay, south coast, just before you get to Plymouth. And that particular day, there was so much rubbish, you couldn't even see the sand. There is a beach under there. And you can imagine just how many volunteers had to go down. So we work collaboratively. Sometimes you can see there's a beach in distress. So our volunteers will travel, COVID aside, when we're allowed to travel, and actually help clear up the plastic from other beaches that aren't in our locality. Because if we didn't, then in the summer, perhaps sometimes the beaches that the visitors and the locals go to might look like this. The winter is particularly bad if there's been high storms and high tides, and the plastics can wash ashore on a very regular basis. Not just plastics, of course, we see a fair amount of bottles, barbecues. This I don't think people realise is particularly harmful. This is balloon debris. So if people have released balloons either accidentally or on purpose outdoors, the balloons themselves, the stoppers and the cords, they actually don't go to space or disappear or go to heaven or anywhere else that people might think. They come back down again. And because of the wind and the waves and the geography of Cornwall, we get balloons from everywhere. And as you can see, not just in our coast and our beaches, they come down in livestock fields as well. And they're a particularly harmful type of plastic pollution to our wildlife. I suppose I don't need to mention cigarette ends. We've all seen them in towns, cities. People drop drop them in the side of the roads. And each one of those cigarette ends has a filter at the end, which is made out of plastic. And I don't think a lot of adults realise that one cigarette end can be incredibly harmful, not just because of the plastic, but because of the toxins actually in the filter itself. So these are doubly dangerous to our environment and wildlife. Sanitary items, nappies, wet wipes, an incredible amount of things that people think are okay to bury on beaches for other people's children to play in. And now, of course, we are seeing ridiculous amounts of discarded PPE, not just single-use masks. There's a fair amount of fabric and reusable masks as well. Coast, countryside, car parks, you name it, they're there. And again, it's got elastic in each of the masks. That's a danger to wildlife. The fabric itself will take a long time to decay. And again, things can get tangled up in them. They're a big threat at the moment, the PPE. This slide is a slide to show you microplastics. So any piece of plastic that is less than 5 millimeters in size is classed as a microplastic. And this could be big things, so big items of plastic that have broken, but also in this picture are little tiny pellets called nurdles and biobeads. And they're a very specific type of microplastic, and I'll explain about those in a little while. This is a picture of a rock pool that I took in February in Marazion. And I should be able to show you the anemones and the starfish and the little shrimps and the blennyfish, the wildlife in the rock pool. But there is so much microplastic floating on the surface that you can't actually see any of the creatures. And sadly, on some beaches, this is a regular occurrence, especially in the winter when we get the big tides, of incredible amounts of microplastics in the water. So I thought I'd finish this section on a question. So I don't know whether any of you have ever thought about how much plastic floats and how much sinks, because there is a different types of plastics are made with different ingredients and different manufacturing processes, and not all plastic floats in the sea. So I'm just going to pose this. I'm going to give you the answer in a second. What percentage of plastics that enter the sea actually float? And I've given 3 options: 10% float, 30% float, or 75% float. So I don't know whether you'll be surprised by the answer, but actually, out of all the plastics entering the sea, only 30% float, which means the vast majority of plastics entering the sea sink. And that's quite a scary thought as well. I'm going to see if I can just stop sharing there, if I can get round to the right screen. So I think that's an incredibly sad statistic. Of all the plastic entering the ocean, 70% of it is going to sink and it's going to end up at the bottom of the ocean. The beach cleaning groups and the litter picking groups are doing a great job, and it's a wonderful thing to do, but we're only picking up the floaty plastic that floats ashore. I've showed you some of the pictures there. I want to show you some more beach cleaned plastics I've got with me, just to give you the range of plastics and to show you it's not just straws and bottle tops. So, incredible amount of cutlery of all kinds: plastic, knives, forks, spoons. Where from? Barbecues, left abandoned on beaches in the countryside. We get an awful lot of plastic cutlery. And also, surprisingly, huge amounts of plastic combs and hairbrushes and actually hair scrunchies and elastic bands as well. We find these quite a lot in car parks. If you ever look on the ground in a car park, I can guarantee around a car park in a major supermarket, you will find elastic bands and hair scrunchies. We don't quite know why that happens, but it does. Another one we find on almost every beach clean are cigarette lighters. So plastic cigarette lighters, sometimes they're empty, sometimes they have fuel inside them. This is one you might not immediately recognise, so I will open the jar. We find these specifically at different times of the year, usually around the beginning of November. They're tubes and they're slightly blackened on the inside. Sometimes we find them at New Year too. Lots of little orange pointy bits, and you've probably guessed what they are. They're the inside of fireworks. So quite a lot of fireworks have a great big tube of plastic inside them. And if you've let your rocket go, or you've had a firework party and you walk away from it, you've left the plastic pollution behind. And actually, this can enter the sea. It can enter the sea through falling into streams, being blown by the wind, by the rain, into drains. Any piece of plastic, even if it's littered in towns and cities, can end up in the sea because of the water courses. I'll show you the amount of, I showed you some slides of balloons, give you the scale of some of the balloon debris that we pick off the beaches. Stoppers, whole balloons, the little cords. I don't think people who let balloons go, and I know some people do organised balloon releases in memory or to celebrate, but it's aerial litter. The balloons come straight back down again when they leak or they burst. And as I say, Cornwall seems to take a hit and get everybody's balloons from everywhere. This is a really bizarre one. For some reason, we find an incredible amount of plastic toothbrushes. A lot of the groups have tried to work out why this is, because we don't think people clean their teeth on a beach, but they're coming from somewhere. Plastic toothbrushes of every shape and kind. We talked about the cigarette ends, ridiculous amounts of cigarette ends, but also things like these. And they're golf tees. So we're thinking that these are coming from golf courses that are near to coastal areas that again get washed into streams and drainage gullies, because these are an incredibly common find on our beach cleans too. Cotton bud sticks, but thankfully, hopefully this should start reducing very soon, because cotton bud sticks are now paper stemmed, whereas these that we've picked up in the past historically are the plastic ones. So hopefully that type of plastic pollution might start decreasing very soon. Also, this is a really common one, again, after particularly November, and it's poppy stems and the poppies that people wear for remembrance. And actually the green stems are plastic. And if people have left reeds and so on in the outdoors, sadly, they get broken apart and we end up picking up those. So you can see, I hope, the range of plastics that we're finding. It's not just straws and bottle tops. If I can show you the jar of microplastic, I showed you a picture of the rock pool. So this is the jar of microplastic that came from that rock pool. And actually we counted every bit of plastic, microplastic from that rock pool. And would you believe, in one rock pool, there are over 10,000 separate pieces of microplastic. And if you scale that up across all the rock pools and all the beaches, that amount of microplastic in the ocean is just incredible. And this is particularly harmful. Ask yourselves this. Why is the plastic particularly dangerous? So anything from the microplastics or to the large fishing crates and the netting and the balloons. Why are we even bothering picking it out of the environment? And as a marine medic, I go to rescue seals, dolphins, seabirds around our coast. So I think we see firsthand just how easy it is for our creatures to become either entangled. If you imagine something like an abandoned fishing net, or even an abandoned bunch of balloons with cords on, it's incredibly easy for a creature like a playful seal pup to actually become entangled in this plastic. And if they do that as a pup, if they become entangled in the plastic when they're small and they grow, the plastic actually gets tighter around their bodies, and that can cause severe injuries. It can stop them feeding, it can stop them swimming. And this is the type of injuries we're seeing. And then we have the ingestion of plastics, so the accidental eating of the plastics, particularly small microplastics. If you can imagine that if you're a marine creature, even a fish or a basking shark or a dolphin, and you're feeding in the water with your mouth open, and the water has got the plastics in it right the way down through the water column, so you'll have floating plastic at the top and you'll have different density plastics throughout the water column. These creatures have got no chance. They're accidentally ingesting the plastics and it's getting inside their bodies. And if a fish like a cod or a mackerel or a herring is eating the microplastics and humans are eating those fish, it's in the food chain. We're indirectly eating the plastics too. So I'd like to share some pictures of some rescues that I've been on recently to show you some of the wildlife and how it's actually affecting our wildlife here in Cornwall. So this particular grey seal pup is about 5 weeks old, and she should be round and fat and really strong and be able to withstand the winter storms. And sadly, she's really thin. And when we were called to her, she was quite badly injured, and she's in a cage because we're taking her to the hospital facility at Gweek. But you can see we've had to put some blue spray, it's antibiotic spray, on her neck because she had a really bad neck wound, and it was caused by this. And this is a piece of monofilament netting, and it was tied around her neck so tightly that actually it had cut into her neck and it had stopped her feeding as well. So she'd lost weight, she couldn't swim, and she had a severe wound on her neck. This seal pup, it's quite hard. You have to look quite carefully. You can see something from under her chin going up the side of her face. We take pictures initially on a zoom lens just to make sure we don't disturb the seals unless we have to, but we could tell from this picture that there was something not only around her face but around her flipper. You can see something white and stringy at the bottom of her flipper. And when we actually did the rescue and we cut that off, we found that it was the elastic and the wadding from a nappy. So it's different types of plastic. Even something like a nappy, a children's nappy that's been left on the beach, can impact our wildlife quite severely. Again, we see seal pups. This particular seal pup was lucky enough to be found, and as you can see how close he was to the balloon. We always do a beach clean and a litter pick if we can while we're doing the rescues to remove any of the plastics from around the animals. This seal is actually at the bottom of a very, very stiff cliff, steep cliff, very inaccessible. But you can see that she's got something green around her neck, and it's actually a child's frisbee, one with a hole in. And she's presumably swam into it when she was smaller, and it's become tight around her neck. And we are trying to work out a safe way of abseiling down to this particular zone at the minute, because if we don't get that plastic off that seal's neck very quickly, she will get to a stage where she won't be able to eat and it will impact her feeding. So we're trying to work out how to safely rescue her at the moment. Not just seals, we have dolphins that become entangled, and any amount of seabirds. This poor seagull actually had plastic inside its mouth and wrapped around its leg. The seals are taken to the hospital at Gweek, and birds, we have a couple of hospital facilities in Cornwall, one at Mousel, and we have some wildlife vets who will do the rehabilitation. But the initial rescue and actually detangling them from the plastic is very important. But it's not always a happy ending. And you're old enough and wise enough to know that sometimes you get there too late. And this gannet, unfortunately, had become entangled in the plastics, couldn't release itself and has drowned. And we see a fair few creatures that sadly just haven't survived because there's been nobody there to bring the medics along, and they've perished. And it's not just seabirds and seals, it's fish as well. This is a small spotted cat shark found by a fisherman at Newquay. And as you can see, there's a piece of plastic and it's actually a child's Lego brick and the fish is stuck inside it. So this plastic is affecting are creatures large and small. And I think that's really significant. I think people sometimes think it's just the larger creatures being affected, but it's affecting all our sea creatures. And even if, you know, we talked about the PPE, if you can imagine abandoned PPE in a rock pool and how easy it would be for crabs and small fish to get stuck inside these bits of elastic, everything in the environment that shouldn't be there, that's made out of plastic or elastic, is going to cause a problem to our wildlife. So, what can we do about it? I know beach cleaning in particular is really trendy and everybody wants to go and clean a beach, but we also need the countryside cleaned. We need the towns and the cities cleaned, because any pollution that's in our environment can make its way to the sea. But that's not going to solve all the problem. We can carry on picking up all this plastic from our beaches and our countryside and our towns forever. But if it keeps coming into the environment, it's just a never-ending cycle. We have to think beyond beach cleaning and litter picking, and we have to look at where this plastic's coming from. Why is it entering the environment? Why have we got so much of it? Why do we have things like, you know, cable ties from the building industry? Why do we find on our beaches not just plastic straws and bottle tops? We find the buckets and spades. People actually walk away from perfectly good plastic objects like buckets and spades and abandon them on beaches. Why are we becoming so consumeristic? And I think we need to get back to looking at how we can refuse and say no to things we don't actually need. Maybe cut down on the amount of plastics we're using. Maybe repair and reuse things more instead of just throwing something away and buying a new one. I want to show you a couple more slides, and the first one I'm going to show you is of a container ship. And a lot of the pollution in our ocean, especially in Cornwall, comes from container spill items. So the big container ships that plough the oceans day and night, year after year, they get wobbled in storms, and frequently the containers fall off those ships and into the ocean, and it's quite a lot. And if you imagine each one of the containers could be the size of a bus and it's full of things, then if a container falls off a ship and the things spill into the ocean, that's a source of plastic pollution that's not individual littering, but it's because we're buying and selling and manufacturing and trading and ordering things online. You know, a lot of the pollution that comes from the container spill is because of our consumerism and our consumeristic habits. So I'll show you the final few slides before we get a chance to ask some questions. So here is a typical container ship spill. The World Shipping Council do a study every few years, and their last study estimated that about 1,500 containers are lost from ships every year. That's every year. 1,500 of those massive containers just fall off ships every year, and everything inside them spills into the ocean. And in Cornwall, we've had particular hits because of the way the ocean currents work. You have gyres, you have circular currents of hot and cold water around the world that circulate the waters. And if plastics spill in from either littering or from container spills or just from discharge in streams and rivers, they can circulate great distances, and storms that hit the side of one of these circular gyres can actually pull plastics from one gyre to the next, and so the plastics are moved around the earth. And because Cornwall sticks out, as I say, peninsula, water and waves, we've had vanished bottles from a container spill that happened just off the shores of Cornwall. We had our beaches covered in HP cartridges, and they were actually from a container spill in the Azores. They'd travelled thousands of miles to get here. And there's a famous container spill that happened in 1997 when a container full of Lego was spilled just as the ship rounded Land's End. And even though that was 1997, we are still picking the Lego off the beaches today. And it looks fine. It's not broken, it's not damaged, it's perfectly fine. So as you get older, you will get bombarded with adverts that you need this thing. Everybody's got one of these. Buy this now. And we all have choices. We all have choices in our life about what we buy, what we need, what we use, what we repair, what we throw away. And I think it's about what choices we all make. If you ever get a chance to visit the incinerator in Cornwall, please go. It's fascinating and it blows your mind. All our rubbish in Cornwall that isn't recycled now goes to the incinerator to be burned, because the previous landfill site, the hole that we used to send it to in the ground to be buried, is full. So now we burn the rubbish that isn't recycled. But when you go and you see the scale, I took these photographs, and this mountain of rubbish, you could see that the lorries bringing, the bin lorries bringing the rubbish in and tipping it into this massive hopper where the man is filtering through to make sure there's no dangerous items in it that people shouldn't put in their black bins with these giant cranes. But it's the scale. It's the mountain of rubbish. It's the stuff that we're throwing away. It's absolutely incredible. And it just makes you think, why do we buy so much and throw so much away? Could we not buy a little less? Could we not use a little less? And then you see items of plastic and glass, and that should be in the recycling. So people aren't recycling what they can recycling, and that's, you know, a wasted resource. So the coalition, the groups in the coalition, this is the hierarchy that we tend to talk about. We think the most important thing you can do to help the planet and to help the environment and even help climate change, if we refuse, especially single-use plastics, if we can reduce the amount of plastics that we're buying and using, if we repair more, if we reuse, and then recycle sort of way down at the bottom, if you can't get rid of the plastic, then at least recycle it. That is probably the most important thing we can all do to help the planet. Just while talking to you in this past half an hour, 35 minutes, whether you know the figure for how many single-use water bottles have been bought globally in this half an hour, 20 minutes while you've been listening to me. And I've given 3 options here: 10 million, 25 million, or 45 million. So I'll give you a second to think. And staggeringly, it's 45 million bottles of water. That's just water. Single-use water bottles have been bought globally while I've been speaking. That's incredible. Do we really need to buy single-use water bottles? Sometimes it feels like it's a massive task and we're almost drowning in the plastic. But I don't believe that. I believe we are, each of us, even though sometimes we feel quite alone and it can become quite lonely doing beach cleans on a beach, there are enough of us out there that can make a big difference. And together, each one of those little changes, each change we all make, can amount to a massive change globally. And you can only start where you live. I can't go to the Galapagos Islands or the Southern Ocean or the Arctic, and I wouldn't do, because that would be a massive carbon footprint. But I can help change where I live. I can make a difference in my own community, my own family, my own school. And I think that's where we'd like everybody to start. Start making changes in your own lives where you live, and start making choices that might be better for the planet and each other, ultimately, the wildlife, the planet, and ourselves. So I'm going to finish the slides there because I've done a lot of talking, and we've got 10 minutes or so. It would be really nice if anybody's got any questions that they would like to ask me about plastic pollution or wildlife or whatever, then go for it.
Yes, I'd just like to thank you, Delia. I've got a bit of echo going on.
Okay.
I'd just like to thank you very much for such an inspiring and interesting talk. And I particularly like the illustration, although that is a like, not like.
Yeah, I know.
And I was very surprised by how small the microplastics were.
Yeah, this is microplastic. These aren't microbeads. Microbeads are even smaller, the ones in the facial scrubs. This is microplastic, so anything 5 millimeters to about 1 millimeter. And this is the really dreadful stuff. And you saw the picture of the rock pool. Some beaches, there are microplastics tend to concentrate in certain beaches because of the tides and the currents. So Perranporth, Watergate Bay, Tregantle, Marazion, Mounts Bay. It's horrific sometimes when you can see the amount of microplastics.
Yeah, I could see that. Oh, thank you, Delia. We have actually got a question
Mm-hmm.
from Sophie. Sophie, do you want me to ask the question, or do you want to come on and ask it? Sophie's asked, what do you do with the plastics you collect?
That's a really good question. I know. So we recycle what we can. So if you're talking about bottles, easily recyclable items, we recycle what we can. If it's heavily contaminated, if it's oiled or it has algae, if it's been in the ocean a long time, bacteria and algae begin to live on it, that sadly has to go to the incinerator. But we recycle and we reuse whatever we can. Some of this is usable, the buckets and spades, things we find, we give away to nursery groups or children's groups. We have some amazing artists in Cornwall, and some of the plastics are really good for generating a sculpture, 3D sculpture or artworks. We do try and be creative, yes. So as little as possible goes to the incinerator, but good question, yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. We were hearing from Beach Guardian earlier, from Emily Stevenson, who I'm sure you know of Emily, and they've kept all their rubbish and they're using it in art projects, but they've kept it all because it's a problem, isn't it? We don't want it to get back into the environment again.
We don't, but you do need to be careful. Beach Guardian is one of the groups in the coalition.
Yeah.
I know Emily. But I always give some safety advice to beach cleaning groups. So you need to be really careful because some of the beach plastics. So for instance, I mentioned briefly nurdles and bio beads. So they're the little tiny pellets. Now the nurdles are the sort of white and yellow and blue ones, and the bio beads are the black and grey ones in that jar. Now bio beads come from water filtration systems and sewage filtration systems. So some of this plastic has been through a sewage treatment plant. We often get biomedia filters as well, which are from sewage treatment. So you have to be incredibly careful about storing, cleaning and reusing the plastics if it's that type of hazardous plastic. Yeah, it's not quite as simple as you can keep everything. You need to know what you're keeping.
Okay, we've got a question from Richard, or maybe Richard's group.
Hello, it's actually from me. I haven't thrown it out to the group yet, but it might be on behalf of the group and certainly for myself, because I've spoken to my children about this as well. When is there somewhere centrally where we can find out when you start doing organised beach cleans again? Where do we find that information?
All of the groups in the coalition, so if you saw the initial slide, do their own thing in their own patches. We've got the big groups like Surfers Against Sewage and the Marine Conservation Society that do regular big beach cleans every year. So Surfers Against Sewage have got the Million Mile Beach Clean series coming up, and Marine Conservation Society have got their big spring beach clean. But I would also encourage you to find out where your local group is. So if you live in Looe, the Looe Marine Conservation Group will be doing a beach clean. Or if you live in Mounts Bay, similarly the Mounts Bay Marine Group. So on our website, on the coalition's website, you should find links to all those groups. If you can't find your local group, email us and we'll tell you where your nearest one is. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Is there anyone else, guys? Has anyone else got a question? No?
I've got a question from Becky Red, who's well, Becky, you can introduce yourself to Delia.
Hi Delia, so we've been in contact Thank you so much for such a brilliant talk, and all the visuals were just amazing. I think it's brilliant to really demonstrate to everybody that yes, it's not a global problem, it's actually happening on everyone's doorsteps, and the pictures that you showed were quite shocking. I was really surprised by the percentage of plastics entering the sea that float, and so I was wondering if you're able to share with us, do you know if any action's being taken to actually recover the 70% of plastics that obviously aren't floating, that's just down on the bottom of our seas and oceans?
In Cornwall, yes, we have an amazing group called Fathoms Free, and they link with Ghost Net Busters, and they actually are divers, and they dredge what they can from a certain hotspot. So we know particularly near harbours, we know where the fishing gear, and they actually go and they dive and they pull it out of the bottom of the ocean. The sad thing is that, you know, in the middle of the Southern Ocean or the Atlantic, those remote parts of the ocean, we're never going to be able to get the plastics out. So that's why we need to stop them getting there. And that's why the cutting down of the plastic is so important, because if it continues to just top up the ocean, our wildlife is in crisis. And you know, as David Attenborough says, we need to do something now. We need to change habits and choices now, I think. Can I show you a crisp packet we found on a beach clean? I'm sure Emily has showed you some of the old vintage things. We found this on a beach clean just before Christmas, and it's a Monster Munch packet. And it actually looks wonderful. You could almost think it was still full of Monster Munch. And I'm not sure I can show you the date on it. Can you see the date?
86. Yeah.
May 1986. And you know, it's that just plastic doesn't degrade in the marine environment because of a number of factors. It's cold, it's high salinity, it's low oxygen. Plastics and any material will last longer in the sea than it does on land. So once it's in the sea, it's going to be there for a very long time. Yeah, we need to stop it.
And that's probably older than most of the people attending this session today.
It probably is.
So has anybody got any other questions for Delia?
I love that you've got photography students there as well. I heard somebody say there's photography students, because even if you're not I'm a scientist, but I you know, the photography side, we've got people in our coalition who are artists, who are photographers, who are songwriters. You know, go and write a song about it. Go and take some photographs. It doesn't matter what your skill set is. It is transferable to environmental issues, and it's really important that all young people know they can contribute something to this cause.
I wonder if Richard is going to set his group a challenge now.
They've got quite a lot on. 2 years ago, I set a sustainability competition for the entire Cornwall College group, actually, with my photography class. So it might be something perhaps we'll look at in the second year. These first years. It was quite popular. Yeah, it was a really good project they did, actually, and we got some amazing images that really highlighted the problem.
Yeah. It's really important, because it's engaging. If you just show somebody a picture of a Coke can on the beach, it's not engaging. You have to have that imagery as well.
Yeah, and actually, if we did organise a beach clean, then the photography students may well be able to make some very interesting works of art from what we find on the beaches. And Emily Stevenson was saying earlier that's how she started. They were asked to collect found objects on beaches, and that's how she started.
Yeah. I think everybody's got their own key. And with me, it was animals. I've always been, you know, passionate about wildlife, and you need to be here. You're so close to the environment and wildlife all the time. But brilliant. Any other last ones before we?
Jordan's got a question. Come on, Jordan. Jordan wanted to know how you got into the job that you're doing, and what
Jordan, I wish it was a job. This is voluntary. I have a job. It's a different job. This is all of the work that the coalition does. Most of the people in the coalition do it as volunteers. We don't earn a wage. Even the marine, when I do the rescues for British divers, we're like the Coast Guard. We're on call because we've got a background in biology and swimming and diving. We don't get paid to do that work. So I got involved probably when I was your age in joining a wildlife group near where I lived, and we've got some amazing wildlife groups, and yes, there are careers out there. There are careers as a marine biologist or with the wildlife trusts, or even paid employment with Surfers Against Sewage and the bigger organisations. But mostly all the volunteers are just out there in Cornwall just doing it because it's the right thing to do.
Thank you, Delia.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Delia. And let's hope this is a start. Working with Becky, who you've spoken to, that we can, start to work more on these projects and get our young people active. I think they're already active, actually, and develop those interests. So
yeah,
thank you
please
very much.
Contact us if you need any help with anything.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That was amazing. Really
Thanks.
interesting. Thanks. Bye.